Gus Kaikkonen. I'm the Artistic Director at the Peterborough Playhouse. And I'm going to read a chapter from Van Sherman's wonderful book, Our Playhouse, which he wrote in about 2008. It's a history of the Peterborough Players, and it's meticulously researched. He did hundreds of interviews, it would seem, and it's a really beautiful piece of work. So it's a pleasure to read a chapter from it. I first came to the Players in 1996. It was my first year as artistic director. I had received a letter in 1995 from Kate Skinner, who was an actress who'd been working at the Players, who I had directed as Blanche in Streetcar Named Desire, and we'd worked together very well. And she said, the Players is looking for an artistic director. You should apply for the job. So I did, and after a couple of interviews, the Board of Trustees hired me, and now it's 25 years later. So here is Coming of Age. Change is the constant, the signal for rebirth, the egg of the phoenix. Christina Baldwin. The third show of 1994, Christopher Sergel's adaptation of Harper Lee's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel To Kill a Mockingbird, was by far the most popular and a critical success as well. Robert Lawson, in his first summer at the Players, directed the large cast of 18 company members for the production. The adaptation is narrated by an adult actress in the role of Scout, played by Joyce Cohen in this production. Players favorites Max Robinson, Richard Matthews, Robert Alvin, Craig Rowe, and Ray Langford, appearing in smaller roles than usual, provided solid depth and texture to the performance. But the show belonged to James Rebhorn as Atticus Finch. According to one reviewer, he takes the challenging role and makes it his own. His Atticus aptly mixes reserve and warmth, wisdom and wit, and provides us with the moral compass with which to evaluate the action. It also revealed a little-known attraction of summer stock. To actors who might make far more money doing commercial work, Rebhorn, who was a familiar face in Players' companies of the Maury years, went on to play roles in many hit movies, such as Scent of a Woman and Independence Day, but he jumped at the chance to come back to play Atticus Finch. In movies, I've been typecast as a nasty guy, he said that summer. This is my chance to be a hero. There were several first-class performances delivered by adolescent actors who are key to this coming-of-age story. Meredith Packer possesses a presence and an awareness way beyond her 10 years, wrote one critic. She is physically perfect as the tomboy Scout, and she delivers the right mix of childish curiosity, energy, and rebellion. At 12 years of age, Hancock resident Sam Huntington, already a veteran of the Players stage and Andy's Playhouse, also won plaudits. His portrayal of Jem at a crucial point in his development is both engaging and touching. Huntington validated his youthful stage presence by going on to a successful career in movies and TV. Given the reverence for this classic story, Atticus Finch was recently voted the most admirable character in American fiction. It's not surprising that performances were seen by nearly sold-out houses every night. Jason Williams, Joe Sears, and Ed Howard's zany, irreverent 1981 farce Greater Tuna ended the 1994 season. The play, which became a national phenomenon during the 1980s, is an over-the-top satire of small-town life that skewers social, cultural, and political sacred cows. Veterans Max Robinson and Noble Shropshire, rampaging through pell-mell costume changes, portrayed all 22 different male and female characters, including animals. Reviewer Jill Lawler believed the high point of the performance came in the second act, when Shropshire perfectly played head smut-snatcher Vera Karp with all the right mannerisms, and Robinson, at his absolute manic best, portrayed Reverend Spikes, delivering a cliché-ridden eulogy to the town's deceased judge. That just about brought the house down. With much regret, Ellen Deinstein chose the end of the 1994 season to announce her resignation as producing director, effective after the conclusion of the upcoming 1995 season. Ellen and the board agreed that a successful transition would be best served by allowing sufficient time to locate a successor and having her available to assist in the search. I feel good about this, and the board feels good about having the time to do what's best for the theater. Ellen commented on her decision to leave, adding, "The Peterborough Playhouse has been the focus of my world. 15 years is a long time to be in one place." The Players entertained a special guest for the July 1st performance of On Golden Pond. Ernest Thompson, the author of the play and the screen adaptation of the 1981 film, was in the house along with his wife and 2 young daughters. It was the first time either of his children had an opportunity to see the stage version of their father's 1979 play. The transcript reviewer Jill Lawler sat in the row behind the Thompson family for the show and noted in her review that, "I had the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to observe a creator observing both his creation and the reaction of others to his work." As Ellen Deinstein closed out the 1995 season and her career with the Players as producing director, she could look back on her 15 years with an immense feeling of satisfaction. Ellen had introduced unique and innovative productions, such as the extremely successful 1986 Paul Robeson production, staged at the Peterborough Townhouse, and the 1993 musical Ain't Misbehaving. 2 of the largest and most important construction projects in the history of the theater were completed during her tenure, as were the fundraising efforts to finance the work. Along with the capital fundraising efforts, she expanded the annual financial support of the Players by instituting the first business fundraising drives, the corporate sponsorship program, and the annual fall auction, a major event at which existing patrons and supporters of the Players could gather and new residents could become more familiar with the Players. During her time as producing director, Ellen also continued the work begun 20-some years earlier by her mentor and close friend, Sally Stearns Brown, of developing the Players into an independent professional arts organization apart from the Brown family. Throughout her time at Stearns Farm, Ellen was extremely conscious of the legacy of the 2 other extraordinary women, Edith Bond Stearns and Sally Stearns Brown. All the changes in the organization were accomplished while striving to sustain the tradition and essence of their familial leadership. Even though the Stearns Brown family no longer presided over the Players, the memory of mother and daughter and the soul of their theater was still very much alive and well. An extensive 7-month search by the Board of Trustees during the spring and summer of 1995 resulted in a new managing director for the theater. Keith Stevens officially stepped into the position on October 2nd, the first man in the job in its 62-year history, and the first individual to ever lead the theater without having personal recollections of the Stearns or Brown family. Stevens had been general manager at the Merrimack Repertory Theater in Lowell, Massachusetts since 1990, and before that he was the community development director at the American Stage Festival in Milford, New Hampshire. His earliest contact with the Peterborough Players was when he was at the American Stage Festival. They had wanted to do Steel Magnolias, only to realize that Ellen Deinstein had already secured the rights to produce the play in Peterborough that summer. His first goal in his new position was to join with the board search committee in pursuing their next task, to recruit a part-time, seasonal artistic director. Since Chuck Morey left in 1989, Ellen held the title of producing director, which each summer engaged several different directors for the season. With the hiring of Keith Stevens as the new full-time managing director, the board decided to employ another individual to serve as the resident artistic director for the entire summer, with the intent that they would return for each season. The Board of Trustees announced their new artistic director in February of 1996. Gus Kaikkonen brought to the Players a rich and varied background of acting, playwriting, and directing experience. His plays had been produced in New York, London, and at regional theaters across the country. And Kaikkonen had just been chosen as the 1995 James Thurber Playwriting Fellow by the Thurber House and Ohio State University. You see, it says here in the manuscript, Ohio State University, but Keith Stevens, who is an alumnus, would correct that to at the Ohio State University, as he is constantly reminding me. From 1990 to 1993, he was the artistic director of the New York City Riverside Shakespeare Company. So I was at the Thurber House as the fellow when Kate Skinner's letter arrived saying that I should apply for the job, and I did. And the part of the Thurber Fellowship is that you live in James Thurber's old house, and they have remade the top floor of the house into an apartment for the Thurber Fellow. And that top floor is the attic where the bed fell in Thurber's The Night the Bed Fell. So the third floor is haunted by ghosts, and it's a great place to write and to work. And that's the point of the Thurber Fellowship. You have 20% of your time, supposedly, to teach a playwriting class, and 80% of your time to yourself to be able to work on new work. Gus was familiar with the players, having been a MacDowell colonist in 1983. He distinctly remembers his first attempt to visit the theater on a brisk January day. Noticing the Peterborough Players sign near the Unitarian Church at the intersection of Summer and High Streets, he decided to take a walk to the theater, not realizing his destination was approximately 3 miles away. He recalled, "I walked about a mile or so down Summer Street and finally gave up," which is why there are now mileage markers on those signs. Kate Skinner, an actress friend in New York who had performed with the players, suggested he apply for the artistic director opening 12 years later. "Many of my friends in the city thought I was nuts to take a job career-wise," Gus recalled. "Yes, my agent was very upset with me. He said, if you're not available for work May, June, July, August, and September, I can't submit you for anything on Broadway. I probably can't submit you for anything that runs any length of time off Broadway. There's not much you can do, maybe some television." Anyway, Gus had several opportunities to reflect on the advice during his early sessions with the players, having experienced several "what have I gotten myself into" moments. There was a torrential rainstorm in 1996 that washed out Middle Hancock Road, an eventuality not even imaginable in Manhattan. Worse still was the day in 1998 when Bell-Tate's lumber truck attempted to deliver a load of wood for use in building sets, with all the pieces stacked vertically in the truck bed. The upright bundle of lumber took down all the phone lines for the theater as the truck trundled down Hadley Road. The telephone company couldn't get a crew out for at least a day, it was actually more like 3 days, to repair the broken lines. So with no way for potential ticket buyers to contact the theater, Gus decided to make the repairs himself. "I just started tracking down the cut lines and splicing them together based on the color of the wires." He managed to get one phone line working so that patrons could get through and purchase seats for the current production, all the more important because it happened to be a particularly well-selling, popular show. The most trying event, however, occurred during Gus's first season, when the toilets in both bathrooms began overflowing. The problem, a clog in the drain line, caused by a bundle of electrically heated tape meant to keep the pipe from freezing, was eventually solved. Meanwhile, Gus and Audrey White, bless Audrey White, had to clean the soiled bathrooms between intermissions and after performances of every show for nearly a week. Yes, what we would do is we would turn the water off so no one could flush. They could use the toilets, but they couldn't flush. Then they would go in for first act. We would turn the water on, and the toilets would explode. Then Audrey and I would mop up the bathrooms and turn the water off so people could use the toilets at intermission. And then during the second act, we would turn the water on, and the toilets would explode again. And we would mop it all up, and then turn the water off so that people could use it after, etc. And everybody else disappeared. All the interns suddenly became invisible. So it was just me and Audrey, and I have been grateful to her ever since. Of course, Keith experienced all of these tribulations as well. What was his overall impression of his first summer with the players? It seemed like total chaos trying to get everything together. It's fortunate that both Gus and Keith had agreed with the board, at least verbally, that they had intended to stay with the theater for at least 3 to 5 years. Calamities of such proportions might have dissuaded lesser individuals from honoring their commitments. Besides the annual planning of the season and all that entailed, Keith and Gus also needed to evaluate the overall organization to determine what changes were necessary going forward. The Apprentice Program was one area that required immediate attention. There were only 5 individuals enrolled in the program in 1995, the season before Gus and Keith were hired. But the competition to attract qualified students was becoming increasingly difficult, primarily because of the amount of money other summer theaters were willing to pay students to attend their programs, and the willingness of some theaters to liberally issue equity credentials as part of their compensation, often irrespective of the students' qualifications. Keith and Gus decided to reorganize and rename the program. Students were referred to as interns, and they began paying qualifying attendees a nominal salary, which would attract more talent. Applicants pursuing technical work were seeking opportunities to learn through hands-on experience, and aspiring actors and actresses wanted a chance to appear on stage in meaningful roles. Several individuals who enrolled as interns for the first time in 1996 became longtime contributors to the Players stage company and staff, including Brian Barry and John Egging. And I was able to bring 3 of the graduate acting students from Ohio State with me to become our first second company as well. Gus and Keith further augmented the intern program by staging second company productions, 2 plays staged exclusively with the interns each season, with many of the interns still appearing in productions along with professional company members. The second company productions of 1996, Charlotte's Web and Twelfth Night, were chosen and marketed specifically to attract children and adolescent audiences. It was a deliberate attempt to expose young people to live theater and expand the players' involvement with the community. This renewed commitment to involving young people in the theater reflected the commitment of EBS and Sally that they had pursued for decades of the players, being a conduit and learning ground for young people interested in acting and stagecraft. After opening the season with Marry Me a Little, a 2-person pastiche of Stephen Sondheim songs, Christmas carols filled the stage as the players performed, and Marry Me a Little starred Anne Harada, who has since become quite a Broadway presence and Tony nominee. Christmas carols filled the stage as the players performed their second offering of the summer, Tom Dudzick's comedy Greetings. First produced in 1993, the play blends broad humor and subtle pathos around the proven stage premise of conflicting social backgrounds. A successful son of a Polish Catholic working-class family returns home for the holidays with his fiancée, a Jewish actress. The 5-member cast featured Lisa Bosner, Carmen Decker, John Peaks, and Craig Swartz, all of them making their first appearances at Stearns Farm, except for John Peaks, who was an apprentice in the early 1960s, and all of them destined to become audience favorites for years to come. The Mousetrap and The Matchmaker carried the middle of the summer with successful runs, both of them being familiar staples of the American stage. I was determined to do a Thornton Wilder in my first summer at the Players, and Matchmaker turned out to be a lovely production. Musical director Ellen Mandel made her first trip to Stearns Farm to work on this show, The Matchmaker. She returned many times in the ensuing years to both direct musical arrangements as well as provide original musical compositions for productions. As if to show that they would continue the Players' tradition of challenging their audience, Gus handed over direction of the last show of the season to Kathleen Conlon and took the male lead opposite Savon Martin in David Mamet's tense 2-character drama, Oleana. Alice Fuld, in her keen Sentinel review, had high praise for both actors. Oleana is a departure from cheerful summer fare and is likely to offend all kinds of people. I found it exhilarating. Gus and Keith selected the plays for 1997 that seemed almost guaranteed to attract big houses. There was the contemporary musical review Forever Plaid, which had been a hit all over the country, the final installment of Neil Simon's autobiographical trilogy, Broadway Bound, and George Bernard Shaw's Mrs. Warren's Profession, the most produced playwright in Players' history, and audience favorite A.R. Gurney's Sylvia. The only gamble was the Shakespeare, and they thought Romeo and Juliet was familiar enough not to intimidate playgoers. Plus, both Broadway Bound and Romeo and Juliet starred Jane Howdyshell, who has now become a 2-time Tony Award winner and one of the biggest stars on Broadway. They even added a 3rd week to the run of both Forever Plaid and Sylvia, anticipating greater demand for these productions, and that was our mistake. We thought we could sell those 2 shows really well for 3 weeks, and we discovered, had we run them only 2 weeks, we might have come close to selling out, but over 3 weeks, the costs of running the show were not covered by the audience attendance. Fault is hard to find with the artistic quality of the 1997 productions. Most critics from local newspapers wrote extremely favorable reviews for all of the plays, and several made a point to mention how tight the productions were on opening night, typically the show that experiences the most unevenness as the company moves from their brief 2-week rehearsal into the play's run. Perhaps it was, as Players alumni and former artistic director Chuck Morey noted about the transitional seasons following the deaths of EBS and Sally Stearns Brown, a period in which the audience was reluctant to switch loyalties. Or maybe it was that many of the old favorite performers were not back under the new administration. In theater, as Yogi Berra said of baseball, nobody knows nothing. The Players made 2 significant changes in 1997 to enhance the theater's involvement in the community, following on the success of the second company's children's plays. One was the creation of the High School Project, and the second was opening the theater to other arts organizations. This decision resulted in part from an episode that occurred while Keith and Gus were guest speakers at the local Kiwanis Club. After their presentation, one of the Kiwanis members asked why the players should receive contributions from townspeople and businesses when so many other nonprofit groups did more to provide valuable services to the community. While Keith and Gus could cite a rich history of giving to the community by the players, this frank statement instead motivated them to strengthen the tradition. Working in conjunction with Peterborough's Conval High School Drama Department, Gus and Keith auditioned students interested in drama to join players, actors, and technicians to perform a show at the theater just before the school ended and the professional season began. The initial offering was Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. One of the Conval students in that production, Piper Goodeve, went on to a career as a professional actress, starring in Anne of Green Gables off-Broadway in 2007. Unfortunately, we have stopped doing the high school project because all the funding for it seemed to have dried up, and taking a $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 loss at the beginning of the summer didn't seem good for our cash flow problem. It's a project that I mourn the loss of a great deal. The players also developed strong ties with the Monadnock Folk Music Society, the Raylanmore Opera, and Actors Circle Theater, all local or regional arts groups who were able to rent the theater facilities in the off-season. Another unexpected opportunity to increase regional support for the players came about when the American Stage Festival in nearby Milford had to cancel its 1997 season due to lack of financial support. Sympathizing with the plight of the theater and their disappointed patrons, the players announced that anyone holding American Stage Festival tickets could attend either of the 1997 season's first two performances free of charge. The theater would eventually close the American Stage Festival, and the players were able to further help their stranded patrons and themselves in upcoming years by augmenting their own mailing list with the American Stage Festival's list of former subscribers. The Board of Trustees was understandably concerned with the financial results in Gus and Keith's first two seasons. And of course, Gus and Keith were equally upset with the disappointing attendance figures and budget deficits. Whatever else they accomplished during the upcoming 1998 season, they both knew that a profitable operating year was now the most important goal. 1998 would be a watershed year for the new management team, as well as represent the beginning of important new traditions for the players. On a more positive note, an anonymous and magnanimous gift of $300,000 was made to the theater, sparking several more renovation projects. The players were able to construct a greatly appreciated addition to the offices in 1998, expanding available space for the staff on the ground floor and creating new attic storage space. The women's restroom was expanded and refurbished in 1999, and an even more pressing need than the office space, based on the long queues that always formed during intermissions, were the restrooms. The balance of the gift proceeds was used to install a fire sprinkler system throughout the theater. Keith and Gus later characterized 1996 and 1997 as their learning curve seasons. By 1998, they had a better knowledge and control over the operational budgeting and a significant better understanding of attendance trends and audience tastes. In collaboration with the Board of Trustees, they carefully planned a season that would help minimize costs and maximize box office sales. They also sought out new opportunities to include unique and compelling performances for their audiences. This is when we began to do a very small show for the first show, a slightly larger show for the second show, and a very small show for the final show of the season. Thus, we're making the cash flow work better, and having some of those small shows, the income from those small shows would support the cost of the bigger shows later on in the season. And this system seemed to work and still seems to work pretty well. During the off-season, Gus and Keith had sent a letter to Players alumnus James Whitmore, inviting him to appear at the theater during the 1998 season. Whitmore agreed to perform his Will Rogers USA show as a pre-season production. Gus later invited him to play the role of the stage manager in the 2000 production of Our Town. Jim was backstage in the dressing room getting ready for Will Rogers, and I said, "If we do Our Town in 2000, will you come and play the stage manager for us?" And he said, "If I'm still breathing, I'll be there." It marked the beginning of Whitmore's reunion with the players as he appeared in a play in 4 of the 6 seasons since 2000, with his shows almost always proving to be the largest box office draw of the summer. Not almost, always proving to be. And Jim's final performance on stage was in 2008, once again as the stage manager in Our Town, and he died early in 2009. But working with Jim will always be one of the great pleasures of my career. Later life featured a strong cast headlined by longtime player James Rebhorn and Kathy Manfrey in her debut with the company. Kathy was a Peterborough resident who had an extensive background in theater, earning a BA in theater from the University of Dayton and an MFA in theater education from the University of Northern Colorado. After college, she performed off-Broadway and at regional theaters in Minneapolis, moving to Peterborough with her husband and 2 daughters in 1995. I really had no idea that the arts were so important in the community until moving here. She later recalled of her performance in later life. One critic labeled it an auspicious debut. It is delightful to discover such an accomplished actress under our very noses. She and Jim were great opposite each other. Jim was well over 6 feet tall, and Kathy is 5 feet tall. So choreographing their onstage kiss was one of the more exciting moments in my blocking career. Ten the Lindians proved to be the most popular show in 1998, with almost 83% of the house filled during its run. Cast included first-year players Dale Hodges and Michael Page, both of whom would become favorites of audiences for summers to come. Second to the last show of the season, Lady Day at Emersons Bar and Grill was not well attended, but it rivaled the 1993 Fats Waller review Ain't Misbehaving for its powerful musical and emotional journey. Gail Nelson played Holiday, and her husband Danny Holgate, who did the arrangements for the original New York production, was the onstage accompanist. Lawler exclaimed that Gail Nelson is Billie Holiday, not only vocally, but with every gesture, wink, gyration, and offhand comment. Lawler concluded her review with final thoughts on the play and an affirmation of the entire 1998 season. It has been a season of extraordinary quality. Lady Day at Emerson's Bar and Grill offers area theater goers a final opportunity to take advantage of superb entertainment in our backyard. Another significant event of 1998 was the appearance of singer-actress Anne Harvey and her musical group, the Best Fed Band. Anne was a friend of Gus Kaikkonen's who had worked with him managing Riverside Shakespeare Company in New York. She had also appeared in the recent productions of Romeo and Juliet and The Matchmaker at Peterborough. Her 14-song set for the players' audience included tunes from Leonard Cohen, Patti Larkin, and Suzanne Vega. The one-night engagement at the theater was so well received that Gus was inspired later that season to introduce an after-show cabaret in the Great Room, with intern Todd Allman joining Anne as piano accompanist. It would become popular not only with audiences, but with individual players like Craig Swartz and Michael Page, and talented interns who also joined the fun. I hope you have seen, probably by the time this is let out, you will already have seen the cabaret online for the opening, where the opening of Into the Woods should have been. Gus and Keith also began Talkback Sessions after the first Friday and first Sunday performances of each play. The director and cast members returned to the stage and engaged in a dialogue with the audience. Gus liked these sessions because feedback from the patrons definitely helps us learn what works and what doesn't. Audience members were thrilled at the opportunity to ask questions and share in the candid rapport with the real people behind the characters. Gus and Keith found their management stride in 1998, ending the year in the black and able to reflect on a popular and artistically successful season. The notion that a person can find connection with almost any other person on earth through no more than 6 other people is the theme of John Guare's 6 Degrees of Separation, and it was exemplified in the cast. One of its stars, Richard Cox, who grew up at Stearns Farm as the son of the great Rosanna Cox, a legendary player who was among its first apprentices at the theater. Mary Beth Hurt, who played the wife in the show, was once married to the movie star William Hurt, another former Peterborough apprentice. The 1998 cabaret pianist Todd Allman also made his acting debut in that play, and Todd was one of the principals in North Country, which is all Bob Dylan songs, which was on Broadway and closed by the pandemic. But he had an extraordinary role to play in that show. All of the season's offerings were equally or more popular than those from 1998, with especially strong reviews accorded to Educating Rita, which starred Michael Page and Siobhan Martin, and Wait Until Dark, in which Craig Swartz, known best for comic roles, surprised his growing number of fans by playing the murderer. Those increasingly enthusiastic fans resulted in an operating budget surplus and a record number of subscribers for the season, 1,186. The results were both a relief for the Board of Trustees and a gratifying sense of validation for Gus and Keith. It was a fine manner in which to mark the end of their third season and a solid foundation on which to build. If you've listened to me, thank you. It's been a great pleasure. Take care.